Hey, I'm NerdChomp. About a month ago, I was invited to participate in another Blackthornprod video. My first experience with them was so much fun, I immediately said yes. That first video with them was a competition format that took place over the course of 3 weeks, but this time it was a little different. The concept was a head-to-head comparison of 6 different developers from 6 different engines, making a game based on the same theme, to showcase the differences between each engine. I would be representing Unreal Engine, and the kicker to the challenge, we only had 24 hours to make the game. I had struggled a lot to keep up during the 3-week competition. How in the world would I manage 24 hours? To be fair, I had learned a lot from my time in the competition with time management and prioritizing tasks, and I've also just naturally improved as a developer since then. So while I was nervous, I was ready to face this challenge head on. The Blackthornprod video that ended up on their channel has an abridged version of my experience during this 24-hour challenge. They like the devs to keep their segments short, so the overall video doesn't become monstrously long, and because of this, I ended up cutting out a lot from my original script. You can check out that video in the description, but here on my own channel, I can elaborate a little more. So this was my experience. I didn't learn what the theme of the challenge was until the 24-hour clock began. The theme ended up being physics. There were a lot of ways I could have taken this theme, but one concept stuck out to me. I have always wanted to make a golf game, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. But I wanted to put a twist on the core mechanics of a golf game to better fit the theme. So instead of the traditional golf game controls, where the player can aim the ball and control the power of their shot, I decided to take that control away from the player. They don't take control of the golfer hitting the ball, instead, Ron hits the ball. The problem is that Ron sucks at golf. He will hit the ball at a random direction at a random level of power. The player takes the role of Ron's guardian angel, whose goal is to manipulate physics and help Ron get a better score. Think angels in the outfield, but with golf. I knew I had to move fast for this challenge, so I pulled a camera controller I had already made. It was pretty much exactly what I needed for a golf game. I then got to work setting up the logic for the randomized shot. I wanted the player to know the ball's trajectory, so they could come up with a plan to properly manipulate the ball, so I set up a spline to display the ball's initial trajectory. With the initial shot set up, next was to get the physics sliders working, so the player can manipulate the physics of the ball. There were a few properties I immediately knew I wanted, like gravity. That one was obvious. Some others that seemed like they might be useful were ball bounciness and ball friction. Air friction was a little less obvious, but it was actually very helpful for giving the player the ability to stop the ball in the air either gradually or suddenly. All of these things would affect the distance and the height of the shot, but I needed a way for the player to control the direction as well. So I added wind strength and wind direction. I used this weird janky radial slider to change the direction of the wind. It's not the best way to do it, but under the time crunch it was good enough. To make the wind direction and wind strength more intuitive, I added a swaying flagpole and placed it in the hole. I've always been a big fan of the tilt shift effect, and I had recently seen the effect put into use in a devlog on a channel called WildRot for their game called Hopwander, and I thought I would give it a shot. Tilt shift tends to make things look super tiny, which I thought fit the aesthetic of this game very well, going along with the super mini tiny golf vibe. To achieve the tilt shift, I followed a tutorial that used Unreal's cinematic camera. I tilt the camera and move it really far away, I crank up the focal length really high, and I make the f-stop for the aperture really low. The result is an image where everything looks flat and close together, and it blurs the top and bottom of the image where things are out of focus. The game itself revolves around Ron, who is our bad golfer, but I didn't have Ron in the game yet. So I found a free low-poly model of a human and started to create a rig so I could animate a golf swing. That was the plan at least, but the rigging process took way longer than I expected, and I was running short on time. I only had a couple hours left in the challenge, and I had 0 levels. It was far more important for me to focus on constructing levels and making something playable. So I cut Ron from the game, and I replaced him with this text prompt at the beginning of the game explaining that it is in fact Ron hitting the ball. Then I got to making levels. With only a couple hours, I knew a full 18-hole course was too ambitious, so instead I opted for making only the front 9. I used a modular tile approach, making generic tiles that I could reuse and snap together. For all of my edge tiles, I needed a wall to prevent the ball from rolling off the edge. Again, being short on time, I grabbed a free low-poly brick asset and integrated that into my tile set. I used a free low-poly tree asset to fill in the empty space surrounding the course. I tried to create levels that encouraged the player to utilize a variety of the sliders, not just a few of them. While playtesting the game, I realized that having the initial shot completely random was incredibly frustrating, especially when the ball was really close to the hole, since there was no way to just tap it in like there is in most golf games. Most of the time, it would just completely overshoot the hole, and there'd be no way to stop it. It was equally frustrating if the shot was in the complete opposite direction of the hole. So instead of making the shot completely random, I put some guide rails on it. I made the direction of the shot always generally towards the hole, with just a little bit of variation, and I scaled the randomness of the power depending on how close you are to the hole. With these guide rails in place, the game is much more fun. Right before I ran out of time, I was doing a final playthrough, and I noticed that I had accidentally placed a normal tile in the same slot as the hole tile on the final hole, making the final hole of the game impossible to beat. As hilarious as this would have been to leave in, I ended up fixing the error so the game is actually beatable. And that's when I ran out of time. I was very proud with how I performed during this challenge. I was not confident at all that I would be able to deliver something within 24 hours, but I proved myself wrong and I delivered a somewhat enjoyable experience. I don't intend on putting any more work into this game, but if I did, there are a few things I would change. The biggest change would be making the trajectory spline more reactive to the changing properties. It would be a lot easier and way more intuitive if the spline bent in the direction of the wind and squished down with an increased gravity. I would also add more varied obstacles and courses, more akin to those fun and over-the-top mini-golf courses. During playtesting, I pretty much never saw a reason to increase the ball's bounciness. Doing so would always punish the player, so I would try to balance that better, or maybe even design some levels that specifically encourage ball bounciness. I've posted the game for you to download and play for free on itch.io. A link to that is in the description. It's exactly the build I submitted for the challenge with no modifications, so it may be a little rough around the edges, but I wanted to release it anyways. Give it a try and let me know what you think. Thanks.